Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Manpreet Singh, and I will be your moderator for today's session. We are delighted to have you all with us. And we're also delighted to have Civic 2009 with us, 40 participants, about 15 volunteers. Before I introduce you to Ajay Singh, let me take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about the Sikh Research Institute, or SikhRI. SikhRI is a community development organization focusing on education programs. Over the last 5 years, SikhRI has established Civic, the only Sikh leadership development program in the world. Developed SOJI, the first ever K-12 curriculum in language and heritage for Sikh children. Facilitated Liv, first and only 60 webinars connecting learners worldwide, which we are on today. Cultivated Jathedar, first ever workshop to train staff and personnel of Sikh Institutions. Supported 35 and The Widow Colony, films that seek to educate and motivate. And we created a global reach throughout USA, Canada, England, Scotland, India, Pakistan, and South Africa. Let us begin our session today. Your instructor today will be Ajay Singh. Ajay Singh came to the United States in 1960 on a Murray and Leonie Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship. He is a professor of anatomical sciences at New York University. Ajay Singh serves on the advisory board of Sikh Research Institute in Texas and the United Sikhs as trustee of the MBSK Foundation. He currently serves on the editorial advisory board of the Sikh Review. He has authored 4 collections of essays on his journey of Sikh in North America. Sikhs and Sikhism, a view with a bias, The Sikh Way, A Pilgrim's Progress, Being and Becoming a Sikh, The World According to Sikhi. Ajay Singh is also a regular columnist on the online magazine SikhSheet.com and has lectured extensively on interfaith issues. So, without further ado, let me present Ajay Singh.
Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. When some time ago Harinder suggested we do a session on Sikh institutions, I had just labeled it Sikh institutions, and then he took the liberty of adding thinking, the word thinking to it, so it became thinking Sikh institutions. And I wondered if that meant that these entities, our institutions, were thinking institutions, that they could think. And that I thought sounded like an oxymoron, knowing how things work in our community. So then he very wisely added RE to it, so it became Rethinking Sikh Institutions. Now, when we think of Sikh institutions, we generally think of Akal Takht, and sometimes we club with it what we call the Sarbat Khalsa. Or we think of the Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, SGPC, or the Delhi Gurdwara Management Committee. Since they function similarly, do similar things, and have a similar history, I clubbed them together as well. We hardly ever think of our local Gurdwara, and that's why I have an asterisk on that local. We hardly ever think of the local Gurdwara as an institution that we ought to be thinking about. Now, our Gurdwaras, and I'll start with them, the smallest and the most fundamental of Sikh institutions date from the earliest days of our faith. SGPC and the Delhi Gurdwara Management Committee are really relatively new organizations with a relatively limited charter, and they came about in difficult times in our history. The two operated together from 1925, when initially formed, to 1971, and then they separated. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Historical texts exist, but with roles that are best uncertain. And I think anybody would have to agree that our institutions today are at best in a state of flux. But Sikhs are now no longer limited to Punjab or even India. We have carved an identity and in many countries of North America, Europe, United Kingdom, Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and so on, during the past 150 years. But from the 90 minutes or so that we will spend together today, what kind of an outcome can we expect? Now, it would not be to resolve the issue of the Sikh institutions. It would be to initiate an exploration of how our institutions evolved, what purpose they serve, how they need to be restructured or reinvented to serve the needs of our modern day existence in a global village. What kind of a relationship do we envision with the existing institutions in India or elsewhere in the world? I would have preferred, my bias is for an open format where I can see you and you can see me, and we can talk to each other and you can ask the questions you wish, to which I may or may not have an answer, likely the second, that latter. But today I think I'm just as happy with a format where I can't see you playing solitaire on your computers, and you can't see me, because the things that we talk about are going to open a Pandora's box and might put you in some kind of a lynching mood, and I'm just as happy to be at a distance. Now, we will talk about these, but we will treat the questions incompletely. What are they for, these institutions? If free people need institutions for sharing commonality of tradition, interest, for self-governance, for dialogue, for national conversation, for resolving internal matters of lifestyle, like the function that courts do in a modern secular society. So we'll have to look at a little history and some evidence for the Akal Takht and the SGPC. And I want you to keep a truism in mind, that institutions reflect the people that we are, and we get the leaders that we deserve. Now, our fundamental institution, the smallest one, unit, family or the Gurdwara, and our, I'll only tell you two sentences about the history of our Gurdwaras in this country. Most of them are post-1970 development. It is when the immigrant Sikhs started coming here in larger numbers, although we've been here 100 years, but in larger numbers only since 1970. And we have over the years founded about 200 Gurdwaras. Now these Gurdwaras founded by immigrants are put together primarily to capture what I call the sights, sounds, smells of home. And that is why they smell the way they do. That's why they function the way they do. There has been an unfiltered transfer of management models and methods and expectations and behavior, and that's why they operate the way they do. Now, what do I really expect when I go to a Gurdwara? Minimally, I would expect that a visit to a Gurdwara should give me a page of glorious history, some principles to construct a life, not just to make a living. There's a difference between making a life and making a living. We all know how to do the latter. Some music to transcend the words and vocabulary, to connect me to the universal within us all, the ultimate reality, and the company of fellow seekers, a sangat. A random collection of people is not that. As Bhai Gurdas said, "Kahu ki sangat mil jeevan mukat hoye, kahu ki sangat mil jampur jaat hai." Some company will liberate one, others will consign one to hell. Now, even the most charitable observer of Sikh Gurdwaras would have to conclude that they are in disarray, and that perhaps seems too mild and inadequate a judgment. Are Sikhs on the merry road to self-destruction? Are we imploding because of some inherent genetic flaw that dictates Sissipar's behavior? Now, there are many issues, how others portray us and how others look at us, and they deserve serious consideration, but not today. That's for another time. Here I wish to draw your attention to the current health of Sikh institutions and how well or ill they serve their purpose, and what might we do about it. Let us start with two of the most frustrating and annoying situations that appear to challenge us repeatedly. Now, let me move on to, I have to master the computer. That takes me a little time. The two matters that bother us, one, of course, is the issue of elections. And over the past few years, you know that perhaps almost 50 of the nearly 200 Gurdwaras have ended up in court, election-related violence within the Gurdwara premises, or the political factions have ended up in the judicial system, criminal courts, civil courts, suing each other. Keep in mind that the money spent on legal fees comes from an immigrant community, robs the Gurdwaras of other community-based programs. As an example, one New York Gurdwara spent, I remember a few years ago in the 1980s, it spent about $40,000 on legal fees, like amount spent on revision of their bylaws, and similarly a large amount on the election expenses. And then the contentious matters were referred first to the Akal Takht, which issued directives and hukamnamas, and again ended up in the American courts. Another matter that is divisive for Sikhs relates to the Akal Takht itself. The many hukamnamas that have come to us in a steady stream, the rapidity and the seeming mindlessness with which the Jathedars are appointed or replaced. I wish to underscore that these matters form the jumping point for initiating a debate. I speak not to endorse nor to castigate any particular person, action, or event. The purpose is not to analyze the individuals, however venal or venerable they may appear to be, but to examine the system. To survive and thrive, an institution depends on a codified system of laws, rules, and traditions. Without a system in place, an institution neither survives nor thrives very well. For starters, look at some of the hukamnamas we have gotten, like can you eat langar on tables and chairs? Can you have pews in your Gurdwara instead of sitting on the floor? Can you marry in a rented hall? And who might do the seva and who might not? A woman cannot perform kirtan, harmandir, or do other seva. Why not? Women perform that seva and other things in Gurdwaras all over the world. But this is the way our institutions function. That's what we're going to be talking about. So a little history first. Consider our premier body, the Shromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee, SGPC. It was founded after a titanic, even historic struggle, denuded of the political veneer. The fight was for the empowerment of the ordinary Sikhs. At that time, Gurdwaras were controlled by a corrupt system of managers, mahants, answerable to an alien British government, not accountable to Sikhs. Gurdwaras had become their heritable property. In the major Gurdwaras in the pre-SGPC days, un-Sikh-like practices dotted the landscape. Idols were installed in Gurdwaras where dancing girls also offered their wares and wine flowed freely. Gurdwaras were not equally open to Sikhs of the so-called lower classes. Even Christian worship could be found in the walkway around in the Parikrama. Now, ordinary Sikhs were right to rise against such denigration of Sikh tradition. They did with a moral force that shook the British Empire, even taught a lesson or two in non-violence to Mahatma Gandhi. The beginning of the SGPC are rooted in such glorious history. Circumstances were different then. The British ruled India. The structure of the SGPC required an act of government of the day to be recognized under law. The birth of the SGPC was not easy or painless. The Sikhs debated it. The British negotiated it before it saw the light of day. The Sikh Gurdwaras Act established the SGPC in 1925. The management of the historical Gurdwaras in the state of Punjab was to be its jurisdiction, limited. The Delhi Gurdwara Management Committee, modeled on the SGPC, functions similarly, again a limited jurisdiction to Delhi. And during the days of Indira Gandhi in 1971, the two bodies were separated by law. Now, it is not always easy to see what the ramifications, long-term ramifications of a historical event will be. Yet some sane voices were raised even then. Principal Niranjan Singh, the Sikh National College Qadian, a major Sikh institution of the time, in 1925, he wrote that you have no doubt been able to get rid of the corrupt mahants, but the ones you shall now install will not be so easy to dislodge. I would say amen to that. And then the Secretary of the Punjab government, a British fellow, who helped draft the bill, and I couldn't find his name in my records, he said at that time, this act shall ensure that the Sikhs give no more trouble to the government. As a consequence, they shall only be fighting among themselves. Times have now changed. Our needs have changed, our expectations have changed, the organizational structure of the SGPC and the DGMC, I will tell you, are at the root of most of our troubles. Now, when you review these, keep in mind what I said to you, the 30 to 50 Gurdwaras or the 200 in this country have had election-related violence or have legal disputes, and that the money spent on legal troubles comes out of the pockets of an immigrant community and takes away from many things, other things that they could perhaps do with them, that money. Now let's talk a little bit of the Akal Takht and its history and its role now. And I pointed out to you the hukamnamas, elections, tables and chairs, where to marry, and things of that nature. And when ordinary Sikhs question an edict from the Akal Takht, many view such behavior as disrespectful and an affront to the office and authority of the Akal Takht. To some Sikhs, the Akal Takht is the Vatican, and the Jathedar is akin to the Pope, deserving similar allegiance. And when the Jathedars are replaced in rapid-fire succession, many deem it sacrilegious. Now, it is not really like the Pope, and we will talk about that in a moment. Others assert that the Akal Takht was never that important in Sikh history. In fact, the last 4 gurus never visited the place. That is, the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th gurus never got to Amritsar. The Akal Takht, they say, was just another bunga, another building, until political realities transformed it. And the Jathedar remained a bureaucrat who serves at the pleasure of the SGPC. And now that part is true. But bear with me for a while. Now, whatever history tells us, the question is, living religions evolve, they bloom while remaining consonant with their history and their heritage. Based on need and tradition, institutions change or arise to cope with the compulsion and the requirements of the community. I wonder if the prevailing situation should remain unchanged from what it was in 1708. Now, as I said to you, living religions evolve, they change, and our needs change. For example, in keeping with the authority vested in it by Guru Gobind Singh, the Sikh Panth systematized its Rat Maryada, codified it. That's the code of conduct that governs us. When in 1945-50, around that time, it also created a new 5th Takht as recently as the mid-20th century. Clearly, Sikhism can respond to new needs and changing circumstances with a deliberative response and has the power to do so. And I just gave you 2 examples of it. Now, the Panth can redefine the roles of the Takhts. The institution deserves respect. The holder of the chair or position may not. Look, for example, at the United States, the President of the US. The office of the President is universally revered, though many of the office holders, including some of the recent ones who vacated the position, may be viewed as particularly venal, corrupt, or contemptible. And I point out to you 4 examples here. Warren Harding had his share of scandals, both personal character failings as well as official policy scandals and corruption. Richard Nixon, of course, the only president who had to resign office. And Bill Clinton, well, a good president in my view, but personally had shortcomings. George W. Bush, I know I'm talking to a crowd from Texas. I will leave him to you Texans, and otherwise it'll take us forever. Now, some Akal Takht Jathedars have been less than true to their office as well. Look at Jathedar Arur Singh. He was a Jathedar in 1919 when the Jallianwala Bagh massacre occurred. And sure enough, Jathedar Arur Singh bestowed a Suropao on the general who engineered the massacre. Jathedar Kripal Singh, he was a Jathedar during 1984, June 84 when the attack occurred. And I have seen videos that the government of India distributed here when he's speaking and he says that the Tosha Khana is perfectly fine and there's no damage done to the Harmandir. And he's reading from a sheet of paper. And the sheet of paper is also in focus, and if you freeze the frame there, you can see that what he's reading is not what's written there. The Jathedars are human. They are not immune to human frailties and errors, but the position of the Jathedar, the Akal Takht, seems to have become, in recent years, a revolving door with little credence. Hostage to Punjab politics. Now, we have 5 Takhts. and we have 5 Jathedars. There used to be 4 Takhts before 66, now there are 5 Takhts. How should they function? What powers should they have? What obligations? We often feel that the voices of the Sikhs should be or are channeled through the 5 Takhts. It follows then that we look to the Takhts to resolve our disputes. It is not important whether that was the role they played during the lifetime of the Gurus. The community has evolved, now it's widely distributed all over the world, and this is the expectation, that the Takhts be representative of the global Sikh community. And it's not unreasonable. The community has added a Takht in 1966 that did not exist, thus has the authority to make structural, organizational changes, functional changes that remain true to doctrine and tradition. I would ask you now to take a leap of faith into uncharted territory with me. Of faith and imagination. Let's envision that what can be. How to get there is a different matter. And I know and you know that the devil is in the details, and I can envision the 5 Jathedars collectively constituting a bench of the Supreme Court of the Sikhs, much like the US Supreme Court. Now, again, I look at the US Supreme Court. How are the judges appointed or removed? I look at this 9-member panel. The court does not accept every case that comes to it. In fact, it hears very few, selects only those that appear to have a widespread impact on the lives of Americans. Any referral that has a narrow agenda or is limited focus is not entertained. The court does not always provide reasons for not hearing a case, often sends it back to the lower courts without comment. Sometimes the case the court has ignored for many years may be heard if it reappears on its calendar. Why? Because circumstances may have changed. The court reflects societal realities. It changes with time. The judges are human, not unaffected by societal issues. I give you examples. Not so long ago, interracial marriages were banned in this country. No one would think about that now. The case, the Brown versus the Board of Education, the Texas matter in 1954, that changed the reality of race segregation in this country. Roe v. Wade, women's right to abortion. These matters still remain contentious. Some do, like the Roe v. Wade matter, but this is what the courts are for. The court may also reverse its decision, as it has done on issues of segregation and race. But the decisions are not handed down in a hurry. There's an orderly presentation of different viewpoints, deliberative process. The judgments of the courts are not always popular, but they're accepted with good grace. The rulings become the law of the land. For example, the court's decision on a women's right to abortion is a case in point. It is the law, although a significant percentage of Americans remain unaccepting of it. The presidential election in November 2000 is a classic example that will go down in history. The country was evenly divided, as was the judiciary. About half the country, and the Supreme Court decided the case by a 5-4 majority. Almost half the Supreme Court thought that the decision was wrong on law and wrong on facts, and that is the decision that put George W. Bush on the way to the White House. Yet the losing candidate, Al Gore, accepted the decision with elegance. George W. Bush served for 8 years. The transition of power was peaceful. Just imagine if such a close election occurred in a Gurdwara here or in India. How many heads would roll, and I mean literally. Look at the example in India. When the courts decided against Indira Gandhi, what did she do? She suspended the constitution. Now, it is important to acknowledge a system and accept it with good grace without anointing it with an aura of infallibility. Now, true, the judges are nominated by the president, confirmed by the Congress. But once confirmed, they serve without threat of easy removal. They are not civil servants like the Akal Takht Jathedar and the other Jathedars, serving at the whim or pleasure of a bureaucracy that appointed them. Impeachment by Congress may not remove a justice except after conviction by the Senate, which demands a 2/3 majority. The process of removal is almost impossibly onerous. Only then can independence of the judiciary be assured. And coupled with it is the fact that the process of appointment is open, slow, deliberative, careful. Only then can good people be found. Not that mistakes are not made. These are human institutions. Mistakes are inevitable. But a system exists that has functioned for 200 years. So, I can see the apex body of the 5 Jathedars opting to hear a case only if it affected the life and existence of the Sikh community, not if it had a narrow focus that involved a local community dispute, like an election dispute somewhere. The local community acting at the local level with considerable autonomy should resolve the issue. Now, local communities, keep in mind, Sikhs are now found all over the globe. Local communities outside India will respond to local needs, conditions and laws. Issues such as housing and jobs framed in the laws of the host community and the language of equal opportunity become their paramount concerns. And to carve their place in a new society, Sikhs often have to define themselves relative to others in interfaith interaction without compromising their own belief and practice. And these ground realities, especially to our far-flung communities, may not be the priorities of our institutions in India. As an example, a major Gurdwara, the first Gurdwara in New York, founded in 1971, I think, at its inception, it's found by a small community where Keshadhari Sikhs were few and far between. Amritdhari Sikhs, I think, were non-existent. So consequently, their constitution did not address the issues and the management committee was mixed. When issues of visibility outside, representation outside for jobs and things like this came up, and the community grew, the rules changed first to reflect the new realities that they should be recognizable Sikhs, and then that they ought to be Amritdhari. So things changed. I suggest, therefore, that it may be unwise for the Akal Takht to get embroiled in the local election dispute of a community Gurdwara, or to stipulate the qualifications of the members. Such matters are indicative of the composition of the community at a given time. To summon people to the Akal Takht on such matters demeans the institution. We must not forget that even in India, not all Gurdwaras function under the aegis of the SGPC or the Akal Takht. Very few do. Most community Gurdwaras do not. So I can see a rota of the 5 Jathedars functioning with the Jathedar of the Akal Takht serving as the Chief Justice, since history and the Panth have accorded him and the Akal Takht the position of being preeminent among the Takhts. The Jathedars may even differ in their opinions, but the system could mandate that their deliberations are held in camera, only their decisions are made public, not the attending dissent or controversy. The model of the Supreme Court of the Sikhs that I suggest here comes with a prerequisite, an appropriate mechanism for conflict resolution at the local and regional levels. If we don't have that, a Supreme Court can't function. We have to decide collectively whether the Jathedars are merely custodians of the Gurdwaras and Bungas, or whether they are to function with some moral authority or spiritual authority. If the former, they can be hired and fired at will. If the latter, we need to evolve a system so that good people steeped in Sikh religion and impeccable integrity and temperament will be found and placed in such positions of authority and trust. Now, can you think of any other religion in which the structure and rules of its premier body, including the parliament and the SGPC of the Sikhs, are debated, discussed and decided by non-believers in that religion? And I should add, while I go on this, that a footnote on papal authority that I have here, that yes, the Pope can speak infallibly, but he speaks infallibly only on matters of faith and morals and ex cathedra, and when he speaks from the Church of St. Peter. His other pronouncements do not carry that power. We have no such ecclesiastical authority in any Jathedars, nor should we. We don't need that. Now, our SGPC, the structure and the rules are debated in the Indian Parliament and the Legislative Assembly of Punjab. That's where they're discussed and decided by non-believers in that religion. Imagine the Indian government debating the rules to govern all temples, churches, mosques in India. Imagine a debate in any multi-religious nation's parliament or senate on the qualifications of a Hindu, Muslim, Christian before he's granted a voice in his own religion. Imagine a civil court entertaining such questions. Not so long ago, and you all know the case of that young woman who took the case to court on whether she is a Sikh or not, so she could get admission to a medical school there on the quota for Sikhs. A decision was made by a civil court, had nothing to do with Sikhism or Sikh thinking, whatever. For elections to the SGPC, approval of the Indian Parliament is required. Any modification to the SGPC Charter discussed, ratified in the Indian Parliament and the Punjab Legislative Assembly. Non-Sikhs dominated both. When we Sikhs disagree, we run to the courts. In doing so, we are asking a non-Sikh judiciary to decide the fundamentals of our faith. In other words, we confess then that we cannot settle our differences ourselves, that we have not the sense, wisdom, or the mechanism to do so, and we need a monkey in the middle. There's a question I have here. How should the Sikhs receive the Hukamnamas of current Jathedar Akal Takht, given he does not represent the Sikh interests? I'll come to that. Harinder, hold on, and we will get to that. Now, to me, it is without question that all authority emerges from the consent of the people. The question is how to make the worldwide community together in a Sarbat Khalsa. And I say Sarbat Khalsa and kissing cousins, you know, like the Loya Jirga and so on. And what we have really in place is a remarkably modern model of self-governance in the Akal Takht and the Sarbat Khalsa. And the two are inseparably connected. What we need is an internal system of checks and balances that is consistent with the authority vested in the Guru Panth. We need a theoretical model of Sikh ecclesiastical authority and judiciary. And then from there, when we have a Jathedar, a Hukamnama would perhaps be, definitely be welcome. So a prerequisite to all this would be to recast the SGPC and the DGMC. To me, without doing that, we have Jathedars who remain subservient to the bureaucracy that appointed them, and their Hukamnamas have the authority that the credibility of the Jathedar is. If he has little credibility, it has no authority. During the time of Guru Hargobind, issues critical to Sikh polity were discussed at the Akal Takht. Between 1721, 26, and so on, we things are largely silent about the role of the Akal Takht. That's our history. It was too contentious at the time. And even then, Manpreet Singh successfully mediated between two factions of the Khalsa. The first conclave of Sikhs, Sarbat Khalsa, at the Akal Takht dates from 1726. And over time, many issues came to it, like the reorganization of the Khalsa army into constituent units, like the acceptance of principality that finally Nawab Kapoor Singh accepted on behalf of the Khalsa in 1733. With some exceptions, Sarbat Khalsa met twice a year at Akal Takht, and so in a sense it was a de facto capital of the Sikh nation. The Khalsa movement of 1699, the concept of the Panj Pyare and so on, and the idea that Guru Gobind Singh, when he took Amrit, when he asked the five to initiate him, in other words, power to the people, empowerment of the people, and so that was a step forward in defining the idea of representative institutions. Now, when Ranjit Singh came to power, he was first, of course, concerned in consolidating his power, and when he consolidated his power by 1805, then he did not really want a competing power center at the Akal Takht, and he did not permit any Sarbat Khalsa meetings there during his reign. So 1805 was the last Sarbat Khalsa that met at the Akal Takht at that time. And the next, when the British came to power, of course, in Punjab in 1849, they managed a Akal Takht through an appointed manager, a Sarbrah, and the next Sarbat Khalsa occurred 115 years from when Ranjit Singh suspended them in 1925. 1925 is when the SGPC was formed, when they had gotten control of the Gurduaras, and so they could hold an Akal Takht, at the Akal Takht hold a Sarbat Khalsa. What we're talking about here is representative participatory self-governance. Remember, no taxation without representation. Remember also what Jefferson and Tocqueville said to you, that human connectedness and virtue are best nurtured in small units. So from the Gurdwara to the Akal Takht, without a functioning Gurdwara, you won't have a functioning Akal Takht either. Now Ross Perot, a good Texan for you in 1992, he may have been a bit of a fruitcake when he was a candidate, but he also talked about small units, such as a town hall as basic to functioning representative government. The idea of voluntary building of consensus in and by the people. That's the idea. And as I said earlier, power and process start from below. But we, Punjabi Sikhs largely, we Indians are a feudal culture, products of that. We seem to have lost the founding principles of functioning self-governance at the local smallest level and unit of our community. When our Gurdwaras quarrel, the first level of appeal is not to the Sangat. They go to the civil and criminal courts or to the Akal Takht. The civil and criminal courts do not know what Sikhism or its traditions are, particularly if they are in this country. The second, the Akal Takht, is ignorant of our local realities and laws outside Punjab and India. Many of the courts here have intervened in our disputes, and they have tried to tell us that these are matters of your internal conflict. Please resolve them yourself, and we have not done that. So the domain of the SGPC and the DGMC have to be considered, along with the structural limitations. We have an electoral system in Gurdwaras, except only 2 in this country that I know. And that really means that I have to divide the community. If I'm going to be a candidate against somebody, I've got to divide the community and prove to people or show to people that I can do a little better or spend a little money. Now, why can't we replace the electoral system by the model of a jury, a panel of citizens like it is in this country? I mean, the laws require that when called upon, I must serve on a jury to judge my peers. Once I serve, I may get off for a few years, depending on the size of the community and the crime rate. But I must serve. Is it a perfect system? No. Is it a functional system? Indeed. I suggested it at a Gurdwara, and the manager said to me, no, what would we do if we get some very incompetent or corrupt people sometimes in management? And I looked at him. I didn't know what to answer, so I looked at him and I said, so how would that be different from what we have now? That didn't do me much good. But now, people are thinking that we need some representative form of self-governance. How to do it? Just one thing, Neki was a very bright, very articulate fellow. He proposed a model in the Sikh Review just a few months ago in March. And the model, to my mind, is not really quite at the functional stage, but the point is people are thinking about it. Here are the first steps. What we need to do is to work with them and on them. How to recast the SGPC and the DGMC into representative bodies. So he suggests a bicameral structure, an upper house and a lower house, and the model has several elements to it. For example, he wants the voters to be the electoral process, we call it a Gurdwara Management Committee instead of the SGPC, to be at least 25 years of age, Amritdhari, Nitnemi, some degree of formal secular education, secondary education or better, some training or experience in administrative skill. Missing here, of course, is a term of office, constitutional framework, which would likely represent the community, some guarantee of transparency and accountability, some process of decision-making and mechanism of conflict resolution, the place of Rahat Maryada in this, the place of Rahat Maryada in this. What will we do with all the Sikhs who are not quite as perfect, being an Amritdhari and Nitnemi and so on? I don't know. These are matters we do need to think about, or are we going to read them out of the world of Sikhi? Now, he looks at the role of the Jathedar Akal Takht, and that to me is a little difficult. He talks about what he will do is invite nominations of head granthis of all the the Harmandir Sahib, Damdamat, Anandpur, Patna Sahib, Hazur Sahib. He will also invite nominations for principals of Sikh educational institutions. Sikh educational institutions? I would think educational institutions are hired by a very different set of criteria. Sikh judges, they too must come from the world of law, and the criteria for hiring judges would be very different from whether they are good Sikhs or bad. Similarly for vice chancellors, outstanding scholars. Well, if the Akal Takht Jathedar himself is not an outstanding scholar, well, management committees of scheduled historical Gurduaras and that I can buy. How will these applications be processed? The nominations, who will select? His role seems more managerial in this process. It's not really philosophic. He's not really talking about doctrinal matters. He's not therefore a scholar to guide us. I don't know. So these things one needs to look at. Then he thinks, Neki proposes that perhaps the Gurduaras could be classified into 5 types, A, B, C, D, E, depending upon attendance and financial spending. And my thoughts immediately, A, of course, is the richest Gurdwara with a large attendance. And I looked at my Gurdwara that I go to in Long Island, too many very well-to-do people. The money is plenty, the attendance is poor, and much of it occurs at just 5 minutes before the langar is due to start. So if you go there during Asadiwa, there may be 20 people. If you go there at the Ardas time, there may be 200 people. It's a multi-million-dollar building. And I may go to the Gurdwara in Richmond, Queens, and they may leave something to be desired in education. They may still be attached too strongly to their roots in Punjab, but at any time I could probably find a couple thousand people, and money is never a problem. But in any event, Dr. Neki suggests 5 representatives come from type A, 4 from type B, 3 from type C, 2 from type D, and from the poor little Gurdwara type E, 1 person, and a screening committee would scrutinize their list of members for eligibility. But you know, there are so many type A Gurdwaras just in America, or in India for that matter. This will be a very, very, very huge body of a management committee, a huge body, the size of a small nation, I think. And he suggested the list, of course, be publicized for public information, and people should be able to file objections, and that part I like, and finalize list to serve in the SGPC or DGMC, as the case may be, and with no political affiliation to any of these members, and that's good. The upper house to consist of, I have another question, how would one check the credentials of a person to be Nithnimiya? That's the point I raised. How would the Red Maryada come in? I suppose that's why I said, how's it going to leave many of us who are perhaps not quite as perfect. You might do your nickname, but perhaps not completely every day, and your mind is not quite there, and God knows. I don't think I want the Jathedars visiting my private practice or my bedroom too easily. Any event, that was a question from Gagandeep Singh, and let me continue with my story, and you'll have more questions than I'm going to answer today or ever. My purpose is not, as I said, to provide answers so much as to set the ground for more questions, because the best questions will come from the answering mind and not in a day. But we will do. And then he suggests upper house consisting of the Jathedars as well as head Granthis and representatives from the Sevapanthis, Nirmalas and Namdharis. And I wonder if Namdharis would agree, because there are fundamental differences on the basics of Sikh belief sometimes. And there are 2 houses have independent secretariat, budgetary provision, and that's perfectly kosher. Qualifications of the Jathedars. Teaching experience of Gurmat related activities for at least 3 years. Teaching experience of 3 years, and this guy is going to judge scholars and vice chancellors and write nominations for them, and judges and professors. A little bit difficult, including Katha Kirtan in type A Gurdwara. Knowledge of Sikh history, Guru Granth, Dasam Granth, track record of Sikh literature, community service, preferably service in the armed forces. I guess that teach him some discipline. Knowledge of other faiths, at least 1 additional language as Braj, Farsi, Sanskrit, Sindhi. And my comment was, how about English and Judeo-Christian traditions? We are not now limited only to Punjab. Now, Jathedars should be nominated by any member of the Gurdwara Management Committee. The list to be scrutinized by a 10-member committee along with present serving Jathedars, and the most senior Jathedar to serve at the Akal Takht. And member of the lower house can be dismissed for cause, upper house only to be removed by impeachment and dismissal, conviction. And my comment would be procedure not specified. How do you, and the role of the Jathedars is not specified either. they exist. So if they're only going to remain managers as they are now, that's different. If they want us, if we want them to be leaders of our thought process and the philosophy, we want something else. So this, to me, is a very good beginning to start thinking along the process, but this had the feel of a Rube Goldberg contraption without recognizing that it has to be an approach that goes from the bottom up. Without the local courts, I repeat my thought that I said earlier, a Supreme Court is not workable. Alongside the mechanism, there has to be a change in the mindset where a Sikh is willing to accept the decisions that come from this judiciary with good grace, even if he or she thinks the judgment is an error. And I remind you of what Bush and Gore, V. Gore 2000 tells us, the same message. So with that, I think we will make questions for time. We have almost half an hour, and I thank you. And there is a question I have here. What should the expanded role of Gurduaras be in the diaspora versus a traditional role, more of a community center? That's another session you have opened, and obviously, as I said earlier, there minimally the Gurdwara has to offer me those things: a page from history and ethical guidance to construct a life, and company of fellow travelers, the Sangat, and music to soothe the savage mind, and all that. And of course, it has to be the community center. That's what Gurdwaras always were, which means everything is possible to discuss. I have sometimes said to our people at the local Gurdwara of the rich and famous here that why don't we have so much space and we use it only twice a week for part of the day, and not very well and not very efficiently. Much of the congregation, I was going to call it audience because it's not really a Sangat at the time, doesn't even understand what's going on there. They don't know what's going on. There's no coherent message. And I suggested that we convert it so the message is coherent to provide those 4 or 5 things. Why don't we build a little health club down there? Why don't we invite sometimes somebody to come speak on cooking for health? You know, our langars seem to favor making us converting us into heart patients sooner or later. We need those things. In other words, for community development, a Gurdwara is a center for community development, the issues for the community. How do we relate to others? Interfaith matters. We need them too. If churches invite us to go there, we need to invite them too. We need to make it friendly. When I took some lessons in defensive driving, where do I go? To the local synagogue. They host these. They host lessons in English as a second language, like public libraries do. Our Gurdwaras need them. Heaven knows our people need that kind of service. We need all kinds of things. When the new immigrants come, they need to know what this country is about. We need to teach them a little bit what the country and the culture are about. Where should we teach that? In the community center, which is a Gurdwara. The Guru is central to the community center, but all kinds of community activities of life go together. When Guru Nanak founded a community, Kartarpur, what do you think he did there? There was a community. Community had all kinds of problems, from land disputes to family troubles. They came and talked about that too. So the central focus is Gurbani and Guru, to connect one to the infinite within, and it gives us a way to make a life. And making a life means my health club, as well as the music, as well as the dispute with my neighbors, as well as the troubles I have with my sister or whatever, or with my wife. All these things are included, or driving lessons. Is Harbir Singh proposing new methods of governance are well and good, but the first question is, how do we as a global community even try to begin implement any changes in Let me read the question. How do we as a global community even try to begin to implement any change in Akal Takht, etc.? Sitting here in, I guess, the diaspora. Again, you focusing on the change that we want to make way up on top of the Akal Takht. Trying to make a change in, it's like me trying to make a change in who's going to run this country, who's going to be the president, how the policies are going to change. If I want to influence policy, I need to work through representation, which we don't have. I need to therefore work at the grassroots level. If I want to change the Akal Takht and the community, I need to change myself and the Gurduaras I'm in. I need to make them functional units, I think. And that's what we need to do here. You know, some of the projects that you have, Soji and Siddiq, their main idea is ultimately to revolutionize the way Sikhs think of themselves as a community. What we have done is we lead a schizoid existence. Our Gurdwara is for half an hour on a Sunday, and I've been there, and I took my langar, and I paid my dollar, and I got my prasad, and the Guru up there somewhere has marked me present. No, that's absurd, isn't it? I hate to put it that way, but isn't that the way it is? No? So we got to change our mindset, my mindset, and I got to change where I go, change their mindset. And then the Akal Takht, what is that but to respond? What does the Supreme Court respond to? The Constitution and the citizens' concerns. That's what governs the interpretation of the law. Are you with me? That's not an answer, I know. But as I said, I'm not going to give black and white answers. But if you go home after this thinking about it and feeling a little uncomfortable about it, and even saying, you know, the guy didn't tell me what I should do, well, then you will do something. That's the whole idea. If you go home feeling comfortable and saying, oh, he gave a nice lecture, I failed. Assuming we change ourselves, this is from Izhar Singh. Oh, no, there's another one earlier from Simran Kaur Khalsa. We need to keep finding ways to inspire another. And I bow to that. I say amen to that. And I would say that you sound like a young person, and now the baton must pass to the young. People of my age, our day in the sun is almost done. Now you got to, and we'll follow you. Assuming we change ourselves and grow towards our goal, what next? What's the procedure to start a grassroots movement at the local Gurdwara? You know, if I knew the answers, I would be the prophet for the age, wouldn't I? And I ain't that. But we got to start with ourselves, and we got to start with our associates. We got to start with where we go. That's where it is. Don't wait for Guru Nanak to come and give us the message. And there are programs, as I said, like this Sikh Research Institute has a variety of programs. The purpose is to get people talking to each other, not in despair that nothing is being done, but in the hopeful attitude. What shall we do? You need the audacity of hope, as Obama wrote before he became president. But I know hope dies young sometimes, and hearts get hardened. But I would suggest you are young and keep the audacity of hope alive and work at it. How does one counteract anti-Sikh forces that pervade in SGPC? How does one counteract anti-Sikh forces that pervade in SGPC and Akal Takht, such as organized RSS activities, which are extremely well organized, apply constant overwhelming pressure? You know, your concerns are fine. What's missing is the other side of it. Let me take a larger view. If India often says, and it does, oh, the Pakistanis are sowing seeds of discontent in Punjab, the Sikhs, and so on, and they're responsible for whatever happened in '84 and so on. And they've said that the Indian government maintained those things. My answer to that was that an enemy can only take advantage of a weakness that you have. A thief can enter your house if it is unlocked, if the doors are open, wide open, or your treasures lying out to be looted. So the first thing you have to do is to recognize your treasures and to safeguard them well and to develop them well. Not build brick walls around you and your neighbors. Don't do that. Don't do that. But your enemies take advantage of a weakness that you have. That housebreaker enters only a house that's ready to be broken. So we need to focus on that. If we need to focus on that, perhaps many of these forces will wander out, away, or certainly weakened, or certainly not be able to do us quite the harm that they do. I've sometimes told some of these people that I'm flattered that you wish to unfold us, that you wish to take us into your embrace and deny us our individuality, that when you say Sikhs are Hindus, it's a compliment, but I'd much rather that you left us alone and give me the freedom to define, leave me the freedom, don't encroach on my freedom, let me define myself the way I wish. It is the right that we have. And minorities always are under guard, and minorities always tend to circle the wagons when they see an attack coming. But circling the wagons is fine. Between good neighbors, there are fences. Good fences make good neighbors. There are fences that must never be crossed. But also between good neighbors, there are lines that must be shattered. So one has to keep the communication with them and be confident and keep working. So that's the other part that we need to do. What is this? A question from Hardeep Singh. We all agree that SGPC, DGPC serve the locals in India. Yes, why don't we form a North American Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee? That is exactly the idea. We need to form local chapters, not just in North America, but elsewhere as well. And again, SGPC and DGPC, there are structural limitations that operate by fiat of the Indian government and the Punjab Legislative Assembly. We don't need that. We don't need a Government of India Act. We don't need a Government of America Act to help us form an organizational body to govern our Gurduaras. So one is that. And if we could do that, an international body of that sort, then the SGPC and DGMC or whatever other bodies they have will be just another representative body of a different country, of Sikh interests from another country, that is India. Or the Pakistan Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee would be representing the interests of Sikhs in Pakistan. And to be totally representative of the interests of that country, because a body ultimately, to some degree, operates in constraint of the laws in which it functions. So we need something like that, and I am totally for it. But the way our Gurdwaras function now, I would be highly suspicious of a North American body of these Gurdwaras. They have no agenda that I see, educational agenda. They provide very little service. They provide no interfaith communication. They do not define our place in the larger society in a very creative manner. They do not help us be good Sikhs and good Americans. But they do have fantastic langars and beautiful buildings. And we need to do that. The linchpin of this endeavor seems to be from Manpreet Singh. The guy sitting across the table from me is, no, sorry, I got the other one. I made a mistake there. The linchpin of this endeavor seems to rest with the willingness of the local Sangha to accept decisions from the Gurdwara judiciary. What tactics can be used to enact this sort of a change? Very obviously, if they have less confidence in the kind of judiciary we have, people are not going to respond to it or obey it. We have to have a system where there is confidence. They need to know that we promise you honesty of effort, not always achievement, not always correctness of vision or judgment. Our judgment may sometimes be not quite correct, but it will be honest. And at this time, we don't think that most of the committees are honest. Now, the second thing is, Who becomes member of these things? We confuse the issue. We sometimes say, oh yeah, we have so many educated people in this country. We have so many professionals. This fellow, the big doctor, the big engineer, makes $1 million a year, maybe a month, for all I know. But that's fine. But that is not the mind we want there. Think for a moment. Most of us are professionally educated. In English, we are educated to do the jobs we do. We do our jobs very well. Our command of the language is transactional. We do not pick up a book on philosophy or history. We cannot parse ideas in English very well. We are trained. I'm an anatomist. I'm not a scholar of Sikhi. In Punjabi, most of us, again, know transactional Punjabi. We can conduct social interaction beautifully. We can talk nonsense. We can tell jokes. That's about it. We do not understand what's in the Guru Granth. We do not read anything serious in that language. We can't. We have lost that art. We do not pick up a book on philosophy in any language most of the time. So if we don't, and we put these members as judges and as chair people of our committees, what do you expect? Those are trained minds, not educated minds. There's a difference between trained and educated minds. Training allows you to prepare on how to make a living. Education allows you to how to make a life. That's why I said these are two different things. And that is a topic for another day, another time. And these are things that never end, you know. These questions last as long as life lasts. As long as life lasts. How many Gurduaras in the US have an administrative council with elected senators to represent their community? So Sadh Sangat needs to be involved with their community. I agree with you. That's why I keep talking about this is a question from Simran Kaur Khalsa. And again, I agree with you entirely. We need to build bridges with the community in which we live. You know, we often complain very angrily, you know, we've been here 100 years in this country, and these Americans don't know anything about us. That's correct. But my answer to that is very, very simple. We've been here in this country for 100 years, yes. And how much do we know about our neighbors? Very little. We know that there are Jews and there are Christians, and that's about all we know about them. We don't know what they do. We never really talk about these things. Don't you think the onus is not only on them to learn about us, it's on us to learn about them. Only then we will have an equal place at the table. They will look at us different in many ways, yet different, but all right. That's all I'm looking for. I don't want them to become Sikhs. I shouldn't say I don't want them to. I love it, but I don't expect them to. And I'm not looking for them to start reading, enjoying Gurbani, particularly. But you know, I go to churches occasionally, and I would expect them to occasionally come to us, to talk to us as well, occasionally know us a little bit better, enjoy our cuisine and culture and music too, and our values which should stem, and our lifestyle which should stem from the teachings of the Guru, from Guru Granth and from Sikhism. And that is why many of the initiatives of the Sikh Research Institute I like, because that's what they are really trying to do. We need more of these things. But you know, the best things, if you look at this country, these educational initiatives of the SRI, the other initiatives, legal and others, of the Sikh Coalition, SALDEF, and United Sikhs, and so on, Khalsa and so on, these initiatives are all outside the Gurduaras. So we need to transform our Gurduaras to more than a building that's used half an hour on a Sunday, does very little for us, and when it does something for us, we don't even understand it. Join your local interfaith community, of course. Simran Kaur says we should join local interfaith communities, and I say that it is necessary. Much as you sit down with your classmates to, yes, much of your classmates will tell me to sit down and have a cup of coffee together, break bread together. We need to do that too. From Manpreet GP Singh. GP Singh, thanks for your thought-provoking webinar. What are immediate steps, couple of immediate steps to affect change? And this is where I wish it was not I doing the talking. I wish, GP, that it was an open format, and you will see the light bulbs go on in so many people. Some will join the local interfaith community, and I hope they will. Some will look for some of those other initiatives that I started, maybe in other words, make the Gurduaras so that young people can hang out there, that they want to hang out there, not just to do their homework and to enjoy the health facility that you put there, or the basketball court that you make there, but also to enjoy the thoughtful message that will come from Gurbani and the music that will come from our Kirtan. Some place that they can hang out. That's what we need to do. Huh? I mean, I know that's just a one-line question that you had, but that needs a book. And I gave you a 1-2-line answer, and that also needs a book, and we will talk more. But I would hope that many of you who are listening to me will conclude at the end that he raised many things. He didn't say much, but there is a lot to talk about, and let's talk about it. And if it can set a conversation in your heads and with your friends, I have won. That's how I look at it. And any other questions we have, or democratic republic method? Yes, of recasting our institution at the local global level, and secret for that lies in our Gurduaras and the Sangat there. The Sangat there. We are still at the stage where we are receptive to money and how best to show it off, because we are new immigrants. New immigrants are somewhat insecure, and we are still at that stage. But I would say to you that the first generation of immigrants came here, worked under great odds, and got us the right to vote. The second and third generation of immigrants made money, got established financially. That was a major concern when they came to this country, and got many of you young people who are out there perhaps, open the doors for them so you could go to the best institutions, educational institutions I'm talking about, get the best training, and you too can now walk in the corridors of power. And now that's why I said our day in the sun is almost done, and the onus is on you. The baton passes to you. What is your generation going to do in the next 30, 40 years or 50 years for Sikhism? Where do you take us? How do you change our institutions? Yeah. Now, as I said to you, that the Gurduaras are founded to capture the sights, sounds, smells of home, and the home is Punjab. But now, for the new generation, the home is different. The sights, sounds, smells are different too. So are the expectations. So are the expectations. To keep them connected to SikhRI, connected to life. If SikhRI does not connect me, Sikh teaching does not connect me to life today, then it's no use to me. Can you, how should Sikhs receive the Hukamnamas from current Jathedar Akal Takht given he does not represent a Sikh interest? We are, I saw this earlier, I didn't know quite how to answer it briefly and neatly. And so I sort of played a game with it and ignored it. Not really, but it got ignored. It's a very difficult matter. I mean, if the Akal Takht today, for something I've said and done, summoned me, I likely will go. Do I have confidence in his judgment and the process which will judge me? No. This reminds me of the Vietnam War days. I was a student in Oregon, not a citizen yet, and I did not have the right papers. I could not be drafted. But of course, I was against the war, and we used to talk about it. Many of us young people, or very, very exuberantly talk about it, and the war, and I was against it. And once, a very conservative fellow challenged me and said, "What would you do?" And I said, if I was drafted, I would go. I would join the army. I would not run away. I would go, and I would serve, and I may die in the process, but I would serve. because this is a war legally constituted in the sense that this Congress has approved it. Congress has the power to wage war, so it is legal. And even though I differ with it, and I do, entirely and totally, yet it's a legal process, and I will obey it, and I will take the punishment for it, whatever it is. And or the alternative, if the alternative is I go to jail for it, I will protest and go to jail. In other words, I'll accept the punishment. I will not change my view, and yet I will accept the law, unfair and wrong as headed as it may be. And similarly about the Akal Takht. But I would work feverishly to change that process. And I would mount a very spirited defense of the practice. And I will try to rope in other good minds like you people sitting there listening to me, to support my cause. And I would like to show the Jathedars and others that their hukumnamas don't make sense. And please, you're capable of doing better. And let's do better. We can't operate with an institution that does us very good. We cannot, though, throw the baby out to the bathwater. We got to change it. And the only way to change things is change comes from below. That's evolution. The revolutionary change that comes, that's a change overnight, or a difficult change. There's a lot of trauma to it, a lot of suffering to it. And evolutionary change is to be preferred, evolutionary change. But for that, we need a certain critical mass. We need to change minds. We need to change ourselves. And the only way changing ourselves and changing minds starts is from where we are, from the person, from around us. Not by a magic wand. Not going to happen. Anything else? But as I said earlier, leaders don't always represent the interests of the people. Even when they get elected, they do things contrary to their interests. And a Jathedar gave a Sarupa, and these things happen. And you can look in any society, and sometimes, and oftentimes, leaders betray the process. Look at the history of the papacy of the first 300 years. There were multiple popes banishing each other, excommunicating each other, even killing each other, murdering each other, doing all kinds of things to each other. We are, that was the first 300 years of their history. And don't forget, our history is just about that young. 500 years from Guru Nanak, 300 years from Guru Gobind Singh. We are that young, and so in some ways ours are growing pains that you see in a 2-year-old or a 300-year-old institution like the Catholic Church and like us, like we are here. So I'm not despairing of it. I just think that we are now at a historic time. We can take charge and we can make changes. We can make changes starting with our lives. And if you buy all that I said, I should become a snake oil salesman, or I should be selling snow to the Eskimos in Alaska in the middle of winter. How's that? I wish I could hear you people and see your faces as well, but I don't have that option, I think. Anything else we can talk about in this? No? When there are no questions, when I teach anatomy, I tell students that there are no questions. Either everybody understands everything, and nobody understands a thing. And I assure you, everybody never understands everything. That has never happened. That's not true. So that's where we are. And I have done it at 1:29 by my watch, and that was my time, I believe. I thank you, and Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.